When reading and studying Parshat Vayechi, the final Sidra in Genesis, one is faced with two troubling questions. First of all, does it make sense that the people in power in Egypt at the time of Joseph may have been the Semitic peoples known as the Hyksos, since it is highly unlikely that any true Egyptian pharaoh would have granted the Semite Joseph that kind of power? And secondly, after the death of Jacob, when Joseph, his brothers, and a whole entourage of royalty from Egypt took Jacob's body back for burial at the cave of Machpelah in Canaan, why did the brothers return to Egypt? It is understandable why Joseph would have returned. He was still viceroy of Egypt, and the Pharaoh could have seen this as a slight on Joseph's part. But his brothers, after all, the 7-year drought was long over by that time. They could have returned to Canaan with their families and flocks and resettled it, but they chose to return with Joseph instead. These questions have been debated by our sages for a long time, and with them we're poking exactly where the text wants us to poke, where history, power, psychology, and theology all collide. Let's take them one at a time and be blunt about what works, what doesn't, and what the Torah may actually be signaling. Joseph, Pharaoh, and the Hyksos is a standout problem. The short answer is, it's correct to be suspicious of the simplistic Hyksos equals Joseph's Pharaoh claim. It's tidy, popular, and very likely overconfident. Here is why the Hyksos theory is popular among some in academia. Scholars love the Hyksos idea because these rulers were Semitic rulers in the Nile Delta, and Joseph operates out of the Delta in the area called Goshen. Also, a Semite rising to power under Semitic rulers feels plausible. But plausible doesn't mean correct, because history shows us the problems with the Hyksos explanation. The Torah presents Pharaoh as fully Egyptian, no hint he's foreign, no embarrassment about needing Joseph's dream skills, no political tension suggesting a fragile foreign regime, and this Pharaoh acts like an absolute monarch rooted in Egyptian tradition. Then there is the historical fact of Egyptians' disgust toward Hebrews. Every shepherd is an abomination to Egypt. That hostility doesn't sound like a Semitic ruling class running the show. The Torah is specific in showing that even Joseph, the man second only to Pharaoh himself, eats separately. That's cultural apartheid, not brotherhood. Therefore, it is obvious that Joseph is the exception, not the norm. The story emphasizes just how shocking his rise is. If Semites were already ruling, Joseph wouldn't be such an anomaly. The Torah wants us to feel how unnatural this very high up the ladder promotion is. So how does this work without Hyksos? Here's the uncomfortable but very Torah-consistent answer. Egyptian power tolerated outsiders when it served Egyptian interests. Egypt did this repeatedly throughout its history. Foreign viziers, Nubian generals, Asiatic administrators, and later on, even Persian satraps. Joseph is elevated not because he's Semitic, but because he saves Egypt from collapse. He consolidates Pharaoh's power. He turns Egypt into a centralized economic machine. In other words, Pharaoh didn't reward Joseph, he used him. Joseph's brilliance made Egypt stronger than ever. That trumps ethnicity every time in imperial politics. The Hyksos theory isn't impossible, but it simply isn't necessary, and it may actually weaken the theological punch of the story. Joseph's rise is meant to be shocking. Now to address the big question, why Joseph's brothers returned to Egypt after Jacob's burial. This question is even better and far more revealing, and those who ask it are absolutely right in doing so. The famine is long over, Canaan is available, they have families, flocks, and wealth. Joseph himself could have relocated if he wanted, so why go back? The shallow answer, which I totally reject, is because Pharaoh told them to. That's administrative, not Torah-level thinking. The real answer, Egypt already owned them. So, now let's talk power, psychology, prophecy, and the economic ploy. The economic enslavement had already begun. Because of Joseph's economic reforms, during the famine, nearly all Egyptians sold their land to Pharaoh for grain and foodstuffs during the 7 years of drought. This led to Egyptians selling themselves, so now Pharaoh owns everything. And yes, Israel lives inside that system, protected for now, but embedded and invested in it. They're no longer free nomads, they are dependents of the state in Goshen. Leaving Egypt would mean walking away from security, breaking political arrangements, and possibly being seen as traitors by the ruling class. This is how empires work. First protection, then dependency, then bondage. And let's be honest and practical here. The brothers were not ready to return. Spiritually and psychologically, they're not the same people who left Canaan. Reuben, the eldest, is broken. Judah is reshaped but cautious. Simeon is still dangerous. Levi is volatile. Benjamin is fragile, and the rest are weak followers at best. It was Jacob's presence that held the family together, but now he's gone, and without him they regress into fear almost immediately. The most infamous line from this Parsha is, "Perhaps Joseph still hates us." That fear is telling. They don't trust themselves. They don't trust each other. And they still don't fully trust Joseph. Egypt feels safer than facing Canaan as a fractured clan. The other truth here is Canaan is not yet theirs. It's a promise, but not yet a reality. This is the big theological point. Hashem promised the land, but did not promise immediate possession, but eventual inheritance. Abraham was told, "Your descendants will be strangers in a land not theirs." Vayechi is the quiet hinge where that prophecy locks into place. And what is likely had the brothers, in their current state, had stayed in Canaan and not gone back with Joseph? No exile, no national crucible, no transformation from a family of loosely bound nomadic clans to a national peoples and a light to the nations. And most importantly, no Torah, the beacon light for all the earth. Egypt was not a mistake. It was the womb of Israel. You don't build a nation by staying comfortable in the land. You build it under pressure. Of course we understand why Joseph himself cannot leave. He is Egypt's creation now. He wears Egyptian power, an Egyptian name, an Egyptian wife, holds the highest Egyptian office. If his brothers stay in Canaan, the family fractures permanently. If they return to Egypt, they stay one people for now and all time. So they follow Joseph back into the trap. And yes, it is a trap, even if no one realizes it yet. The uncomfortable truth of Vayechi is it isn't a happy ending. It's a quiet warning. Yes, the promises of the covenant remain intact, the future is secure, but the descent has begun. Jacob dies in Egypt. Joseph dies in Egypt. The brothers die in Egypt. The final story of Sefer Bereshit closes with a coffin, not a conquest. And that's exactly the point. Oh, there is one last point. The Parsha's title, Vayechi, means, "and he lived." And our sages say, Jacob never truly died because his values lived on, his identity survived exile, and his legacy continued through his children. Using Torah logic, biological life is cheap, spiritual continuity is everything. When next we return to Torah in Sefer Shemot, deliverance for Israel is on the horizon in the form of a babe in a basket on the Nile River and in the very halls of Egyptian power, again, some nearly 200 years later. Thank you for watching the video or reading the blog post. Please like, subscribe, and share this with others. All my works can be found on Rumble, YouTube, Locals, Substack, and Blogger. Leave your thoughts and comments below, or contact me via email to shmu@startmail.com. Until next time, this is Shmuel ben Shlomi of Shmu's Views wishing you Shabbat Shalom.